So Daniel Hale, I mean, this is really heartbreaking. You know, once again, you have someone who is sacrificing their life, you know, being persecuted, thrown in jail, to do what? To bring forward the truth, right? Just as we were talking now, this is not something everyone knew. I mean, it's very easy to take some of the knowledge we have now for granted, but at the time, you know, you could say things, but you know, it was hard to prove it precisely because they were not telling the truth about the drone program. The Obama administration, I mean, dude, even the stuff we know is not the full truth. You understand? This goes very deep. So they were lying about the scope of the drone program. They were lying about the number of casualties, about who the casualties are. You know, it's a rabbit hole of atrocities, as I say. And it's just one part of the war on terror, one part of the military-industrial complex, and the U.S. empire's crimes. And so, you know, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to Daniel Hale. You know, this is, again, someone of immense bravery, immense courage, who has really, I mean, you know, given their life, because look at the decades of persecution that these people go through, whether it's Assange or Chelsea Manning or Snowden or in this case, Daniel Hale. So this is very, very important what he did, right? And right here on the program, we've covered this before. We talked about how, you know, these drone papers that were published in The Intercept, we've covered them here on the channel, and that was just a part of it. You know, this is thanks to Daniel, right? Well, it's widely assumed that it's thanks to him, right? It's not 100% confirmed, but it's widely assumed that it's thanks to him, according to what I understood. And, you know, these crimes, they're so bad. They're so evil. When you say them, you know, people don't want to believe you. And it's because of people like Daniel, because of people like Assange, Snowden, Chelsea Manning, that we have proof. We can actually show, look, this is what's happening because of these so-called, you know, nation-building projects. You know, these we're going to bring democracy. No, it's all false. Look, this is the truth, right? It's thanks to these people. They are really, I mean, society owes a huge debt of gratitude to them, truly. So, you know, just to give you a brief recap, just to give you some more information about what happened with Daniel. So, you know, he served from, I think, 2009 to 2013 in the Air Force. He was an intelligence analyst, did some work with the NSA, and I think The Intercept published the first drone papers in 2015. So he doesn't get indicted for his unauthorized disclosures, as they call them, until 2019, right? So this is only 2 years ago. And as I mentioned earlier, it's the same time Assange is indicted. Well, the superseding indictment, at least, comes out. So, because Stella Morris, I'll just show you very, very quickly, actually. This is Stella Morris who pointed this out earlier, because I was live tweeting about Daniel's case, and she brought this excellent point up, right? So I'll read it to you over here if you'll just allow me a moment to bring this up. Yes. So you can see here, Stella Morris, Assange's partner and fiance, she says, interesting. Hale was indicted the same month as Julian Assange's superseding indictment, which caused profound unease and controversy in the Department of Justice. Assange and Daniel Hale have the same prosecutor, Gordon Kromberg, right? So you guys might remember his name. He came up a lot when we were talking about when we were covering the Assange trial right here on this channel, right? So he's a villainous character. He really is. And in any case, he, as I was saying, Daniel, he doesn't get indicted for a while until 2019. And then they charge him on 4 counts under the Espionage Act and 1 count under theft of government property, if my memory serves me well. And he took a plea deal, right? So they notched it. He pled guilty in March of this year, in March 2021, to 1 count under the Espionage Act. And, you know, usually it's 10 years for each count, which is why when we talk about Assange, who's like charged with 17 counts, you know, plus another one, conspiracy to commit computer intrusion, it's 175 years, right? So they don't even need to get you on all the counts to ruin your life. You can get you on 1 or 2. And this is, you know, this is why we were afraid that Daniel might be sent to jail for 10 years, right? But now it's 3 years and 9 months. It's 45 months. And even, like I said, that's 45 months too much. The guy, he's been persecuted, right? It's not just about how much time you spend in a jail cell. It's also about how much time they spend messing with you and dragging you in and out of court, right? And painting you as a criminal. And, you know, giving you this anxiety. And it's, dude, I can't even imagine like the toll that this takes on someone mentally. So make no mistake, this is far beyond just 45 months. It's designed this way. They do this on purpose to punish people who expose their crimes. This is why with Assange, for example, you know, they're very happy keeping him, persecuted for 10 years, for a decade. And this, you know, he hasn't even been convicted of a crime yet. So this is the whole game plan. It's to keep you in fear, you know, keep you anxious, keep you on edge, never knowing what's going to happen, making you feel this constant anxiety and fear. Because why? Because you exposed their crimes. So this is very, very evil. This is very evil what they do. And, you know, they also throw people in jail for refusing to cooperate. And they throw them in jail for contempt of court, which is what they did with Chelsea Manning. I mean, just, it's so inhumane. And then they have the stones to talk about press freedoms. They have the stones to talk about democracy. I mean, this is laughable. This is laughable. They're literally murdering people. They have a goddamn drone program. It's just an assassination program. It's a state-sanctioned murder program, right? And they're punishing him for exposing that. Yeah, but what about, you know, all the people who orchestrated it? You know where they are? They got promotions. You know, so Avril Haines, who's part of that under Obama, where is she now? She's the director of national intelligence. Like, this is what happens. You know, you murder people and you get a promotion. And if you talk about that, you go to jail. So this is their idea of a free society of you know, respecting human rights. And in any case, with Daniel, there was a fear he would get 10 years, right? And again, even 45 months, I think this is too much. And it's much longer than that. Unfortunately, it's a long, long persecution. And, you know, I really urge you to support him in any way you can, whether it's a legal fund or it's writing him letters, any kind of support. And the same to all other whistleblowers who expose these heinous, heinous, heinous crimes. I want to read you a letter that Daniel wrote to the judge. This is very, very important. You need to see this. This is very important. And he wrote this just prior to being sentenced, right? So this is very recent. He says, "We now kill people without ever seeing them. Now you push a button thousands of miles away, since it's all done by remote control. There's no remorse. And then we come home in triumph." That's a quote from U.S. Navy Admiral LaRocque, if I'm reading it correctly. Okay, he's speaking to a reporter in 1995. Now I'm going to read you what Daniel wrote. Daniel Hale, he was writing to the judge. Okay, so he says, "Dear Judge O'Grady, it is not a secret that I struggle to live with depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. Both stem from my childhood experience growing up in a rural mountain community and were compounded by exposure to combat during military service. Depression is a constant. Through stress, particularly stress caused by war, can manifest itself at different times and in different ways. The telltale signs of a person afflicted by PTSD and depression can often be outwardly observed and are practically universally recognizable. Hard lines about the face and jaw. Eyes, once bright and wide, now deep set and fearful. And an inexplicably sudden loss of interest in things that used to spark joy. These are the noticeable changes in my demeanor marked by those who knew me before and after military service. To say that the period of my life spent serving in the United States Air Force had an impression on me would be an understatement. It is more accurate to say that it irreversibly transformed my identity as an American, having forever altered the thread of my life story weaved into the fabric of our nation's history. To better appreciate the significance of how this came to pass, I would like to explain my experience deployed to Afghanistan as it was in 2012 and how it is I came to violate the Espionage Act as a result. In my capacity as a signals intelligence analyst stationed at Bagram Air Base, this is in Afghanistan, I was made to track down the geographic location of handset cell phone devices believed to be in the possession of so-called enemy combatants. To accomplish this mission required access to a complex chain of globe-spanning satellites capable of maintaining an unbroken connection with remotely piloted aircraft, commonly referred to as drones. Once a steady connection is made and a targeted cell phone device is acquired, an imagery analyst in the US, in coordination with a drone pilot and camera operator, would take over using information I provided to survey everything that occurred within the drone's field of vision. This was done most often to document the day-to-day lives of suspected militants. Sometimes, under the right conditions, an attempt at capture would be made. Other times, a decision to strike and kill them where they stood would be weighed. The first time that I witnessed a drone strike came within days of my arrival to Afghanistan. Early that morning, before dawn, a group of men had gathered together in the mountain ranges of Paktika province around a campfire, carrying weapons and brewing tea. That they carried weapons with them would not have been considered out of the ordinary in the place I grew up, much less within the virtually lawless tribal territories outside the control of the Afghan authorities. Except that among them was a suspected member of the Taliban, given away by the targeted cell phone device in his pocket. As for the remaining individuals to be armed, of military age, and sitting in the presence of an alleged enemy combatant was enough evidence to place them under suspicion as well. Despite having peacefully assembled, posing no threat, the fate of the now tea-drinking men had all but been fulfilled. I could only look on as I sat by and watched through a computer monitor when a sudden, terrifying flurry of Hellfire missiles came crashing down, splattering purple-colored crystal guts on the side of the Morning Mountain. Just as a side note, just as a quick note, what he's saying is absolutely true about Afghanistan, right? There is absolutely nothing uncommon about, you know, I'm just gonna reread you what he said here, right? He says that they carried weapons with them would not have been considered out of the ordinary in the place I grew up, much less within the virtually lawless tribal territories outside the control of the Afghan authorities. I know that because I've seen that myself, been there, okay? When I was much younger. It's true what he's saying there. Since that time, and to this day, I continue to recall several scenes of graphic violence carried out from the cold comfort of a computer chair. Not a day goes by that I don't question the justification for my actions. By the rules of engagement, it may have been permissible for me to have helped to kill those men whose language I did not speak, customs I did not understand, and crimes I could not identify in the gruesome manner that I did. Watch them die. But how could it be considered honorable of me to continuously have laid in wait for the next opportunity to kill unsuspecting persons who more often than not are posing no danger to me or any other person at the time? Never mind honorable, how could it be that any thinking person continued to believe that it was necessary for the protection of the USA to be in Afghanistan and killing people, not one of whom's present was responsible for the September 11th attacks on our nation? Notwithstanding, in 2012, a full year after the demise of Osama bin Laden in Pakistan, I was part of killing misguided young men who were but mere children on the day of 9/11. Nevertheless, in spite of my better instincts, I continued to follow orders and obey my command for fear of repercussion, yet all the while becoming increasingly aware that the war had very little to do with preventing terror from coming into the United States and a lot more to do with protecting the profits of weapons manufacturers and so-called defense contractors. The evidence of this fact was laid bare all around me in the longest or most technologically advanced war in American history. Contract mercenaries outnumbered uniform-wearing soldiers 2-to-1 and earned as much as 10 times their salary. And again, just a quick side note. Once again, absolutely true. What did we tell you? What did I tell you about the withdrawal, the so-called withdrawal from Afghanistan? The only people withdrawing are the ones in uniform. And as Daniel correctly points out here, the mercenaries, the so-called contractors, far outnumber the conventional armed forces, the people in uniform. Do you understand? And he correctly points out too, they earn much more because it's a racket. That's what it is. It's a scam. Meanwhile, it did not matter whether it was, as I had seen, an Afghan farmer blown in half, yet miraculously conscious and pointlessly trying to scoop his insides off the ground, or whether it was an American flag draped coffin lowered into Arlington National Cemetery to the sound of a 21-gun salute. Bang, bang, bang. Both served. Both served to justify the easy flow of capital at the cost of blood, theirs and ours. And when I think about this grief, When I think about this, I'm grief-stricken and ashamed for myself for the things I've done to support it. The most harrowing day of my life came months into my deployment to Afghanistan when a routine surveillance mission turned into disaster. For weeks, we had been tracking the movements of a ring of car bomb manufacturers living around Jalalabad. Car bombs directed at U.S. bases had become an increasingly frequent and deadly problem that summer, so much effort was put into stopping them. It was a windy and clouded afternoon when one of the suspects had been discovered headed eastbound, driving at a high rate of speed. This alarmed my superiors, who believed he might be attempting to escape across the border into Pakistan. A drone strike was our only chance, and already it had began lining up to take the shot. But the less advanced Predator drone found it difficult to see through clouds and compete against strong headwinds. The single payload MQ-1 failed to connect with its target, instead missing by a few meters. The vehicle, damaged but still drivable, continued on ahead after narrowly avoiding destruction. Eventually, once the concern of another incoming missile subsided, the driver stopped, got out of the car, and checked himself as though he could not believe he was still alive. Out of the passenger side came a woman wearing an unmistakable burqa. As astounding as it was to have just learned there had been a woman, possibly his wife, there with the man we intended to kill moments ago, I did not have the chance to see what happened next before the drone diverted its camera when she began frantically to pull out something from the back of the car. A couple of days passed before I finally learned from a briefing by my commanding officer about what took place. There indeed had been the suspect's wife with him in the car, and in the back were their two young daughters, aged 5 and 3. A cadre of Afghan soldiers were sent to investigate where the car had stopped the following day. It was there they found them placed in the dumpster nearby. The eldest was found dead due to unspecified wounds caused by shrapnel that pierced her body. Her younger sister was alive but severely dehydrated. As my commanding officer relayed this information to us, she seemed to express disgust, not for the fact that we had errantly fired on a man and his family, having killed one of his daughters, but for the suspected bomb maker having ordered his wife to dump the bodies of their daughters in the trash so that the two of them could more quickly escape across the border. Now, whenever I encounter an individual who thinks that drone warfare is justified and reliably keeps America safe, I remember that time and ask myself, how could I possibly continue to believe that I am a good person, deserving of my life and the right to pursue happiness? 1 year later, at a farewell gathering for those of us who would soon be leaving military service, I sat alone transfixed by the television, while others reminisced together. On television was breaking news of the president giving his first public remarks about the policy surrounding the use of drone technology in warfare. His remarks were made to reassure the public of reports scrutinizing the death of civilians in drone strikes and the targeting of American citizens. The president said that a high standard of quote-unquote near certainty needed to be met in order to ensure that no civilians were present. But from what I knew of the instances where civilians plausibly could have been present, those killed were nearly always designated enemies killed in action unless proven otherwise. Nonetheless, I continued to heed his words as the president went on to explain how a drone could be used to eliminate someone who posed an quote-unquote imminent threat to the U.S. Using the analogy of taking out a sniper with his sights set on an unassuming crowd of people, the president likened the use of drones to prevent a would-be terrorist from carrying out his evil plot. But as I understood it to be, the unassuming crowd had been those who lived in fear and the terror of drones in the skies, and the sniper in this scenario had been me. I came to believe that the policy of drone assassination was being used to mislead the public, that it keeps us safe. And when I finally left the military, still processing what I'd been a part of, I began to speak out, believing my participation in the drone program to have been deeply wrong. I dedicated myself to anti-war activism and was asked to partake in a peace conference in Washington, D.C. late November 2013. People had come together from around the world to share experiences about what it is like living in the age of drones. Ali Jabir had journeyed from Yemen to tell us what happened to his brother Salim bin Ali Jabir and their cousin Walid. Walid had been a policeman, and Salim was a well-respected firebrand imam, known for giving sermons to young men about the path towards destruction should they choose to take a violent jihad. One day, in August 2012, local members of Al-Qaeda traveling through Fazl's village in a car spotted Salim in the shade, pulling up towards him and beckoned him to come over and speak to them. Not one to miss an opportunity to evangelize to the youth, Salim proceeded cautiously with Walid by his side. Fazl and other villagers began looking on from afar. Farther still was an ever-present Reaper drone looking too. As Faisal recounted what happened, I felt myself transported back in time to where I had been on that day 2012. And unbeknownst to Faisal, and those of his village at the time was that they had not been the only one watching Salim approaching the jihadists in the car. From Afghanistan, I and everyone on duty paused their work to witness the carnage that was about to unfold. At the press of a button, from thousands of miles away, 2 Hellfire missiles screeched out of the sky, followed by 2 more. Showing no signs of remorse, I and those around me clapped and cheered triumphantly in front of a speechless auditorium. Faisal wept. About a week after the peace conference, I received a lucrative job offer if I were to come back to work as a government contractor. I felt uneasy about the idea. Up to that point, my only planned post-military separation had been to enroll in college to complete my degree, but the money I could make was by far more than I had ever made before. In fact, it was more than any of my college-educated friends were making. So after giving it careful consideration, I delayed going to school for a semester and took the job. For a long time, I was uncomfortable with myself over the thought of taking advantage of my military background to land a cushy desk job. During that time, I was still processing what I had been through, and I was starting to wonder if I was contributing to the problem of money in war by accepting to return as a defense contractor. Worse was my growing apprehension that everyone around me was also taking part in a collective delusion and denial that was used to justify our exorbitant salaries for comparatively easy labor. The thing I feared most at the time was the temptation not to question it. Then it came to be that one day after work, I stuck around to socialize with a pair of coworkers whose talented work I had come to greatly admire. They made me feel welcomed, and I was happy to have earned their approval. But then, to my dismay, our brand new friendship took an unexpectedly dark turn. They elected that we should take a moment and view together some archived footage of past drone strikes. Such bonding ceremonies around a computer to watch so-called war porn had not been new to me. I partook in them all the time while deployed to Afghanistan. But on that day, years after the fact, my new friends gaped and sneered just as my own ones had at the sight of faceless men in the final moments of their lives. I sat by watching too, said nothing, and felt my heart breaking into pieces. The truest truism that I've come to understand about the nature of war is that war is trauma. I believe that any person either called upon or coerced to participate in war against their fellow man is promised to be exposed to some form of trauma. In that way, no soldier blessed to have returned home from war does so uninjured. The crux of PTSD is that it is a moral conundrum that afflicts invisible wounds on the psyche of a person, made to burden the weight of experience after surviving a traumatic event. How PTSD manifests depends on the circumstances of the event. So how is the drone operator to process this? The victorious rifleman, unquestioningly remorseful, at least keeps his honor intact by having faced off against his enemy on the battlefield. The determined fighter pilot has the luxury of not having to witness the gruesome aftermath. But what possibly could I have done to cope with the undeniable cruelties that I perpetuated? My conscience, once held at bay, came roaring back to life. At first, I tried to ignore it, wishing instead that someone better placed than I should come along to take this cup from me. But this too was folly. Left to decide whether to act, I only could do that which I ought to do before God and my own conscience. The answer came to me that to stop the cycle of violence, I ought to sacrifice my own life and not that of another person. So I contacted an investigative reporter with whom I had established prior relationship and told him I had something the American people needed to know. Respectfully, Daniel Hale. That is extremely powerful, man. Do you see what I'm talking about right there at the end? That these people, they sacrifice their lives in a way, they throw them away. Because once you take the step, right, there's no going back. I don't need to explain this to you. You can just look at the various examples of whistleblowers, what happens to them. They're all jailed, persecuted. It's for the rest of your life. So that, again, it's a long letter. It's 11 pages, but I had to read it because Daniel can't read it for us. He's in jail because of what he exposed, because he exposed the drone program. I told myself I would give his words a voice, even though, of course, they're powerful enough on their own when you read them. But still, I wanted to read it to you because everything he said is extremely important. And I don't know whether this factored into the judge's decision. Who knows? But, you know, again, 45 months is better than 10 years. But still, it's 45 months too much. What is that? You know, isn't this interesting how all the architects of these assassination programs, they get job promotions, and when you do something in the interest of the general public, you get punished? What kind of a message does that send? right? Don't they always talk about respecting human rights and having a democratic society and being a good person? What is this? What kind of message does this send? I think, as Danica said earlier, this message being sent is to scare people, right? They want other potential whistleblowers to think twice before they actually blow the whistle. They want them to be scared because, when you actually tell the truth, you tell on the government. It's not even actually telling on the government. This is stuff that he participated in himself, right? So it's not like he went and got someone else in trouble. That's the thing. No one is getting in trouble except him, and that's my whole point, right? He shouldn't be getting in trouble. The people who start these wars should be getting in trouble because they're murderers. And like he says, they coerce people into doing this, right? Their blood and ours. But again, the poor draft and all this is another topic which we've talked about enough. Obviously, the real victims here are the Afghans, the Pakistanis, the Yemenis, everyone who's subjected to these drone strikes. But nonetheless, it speaks. I think it really speaks volumes that these things are so evil. These actions, these drone killings are so evil that even when not being there, when being thousands of miles away, you can still be revolted by it and have PTSD from it. Because it is an inhumane thing to do. So no one should be forced to do that, and no one should be killed by that, right? So the people who are creating these situations, the presidents, the manufacturers, the weapons contractors, the mercenaries, they get off scot-free. They get more money. Every president comes in and he gives them more money. Joe Biden just increased the military budget by $20 billion from 743 to 763 billion, if I recall correctly. So, he just added another 20 billion. Who gets this 20 billion? It's the companies like Raytheon, like Lockheed Martin, like Northrop, these weapons manufacturers who make, not just drones, but they also make conventional weapons. They make, they manufacture tanks, warships, nuclear submarines, you name it, man. It's an entire industry. Like, what am I supposed to say? From the bullet, from the boots, down to the nuclear submarine, there's money being made here, right? Every time they fill a pair of boots, they're making cash. So they don't care about human lives, right? They don't care who this affects, who gets killed, who has PTSD. They don't give a shit. It's about money. So these people are evil. They need to be jailed. They need to be jailed, not Daniel Hale, not Julian Assange, Snowden, Chelsea Manning. No. I think this is a fundamentally flawed message for any civilized or so-called civilized society. This is a fundamentally flawed message here. I wanted to read this to you. I needed to read this to you. It's very important, and I'm really sorry for him. I'm really sorry that he has to go to jail. He really doesn't deserve that, and he doesn't deserve any of the shit before that. And all the people who've been killed by the drone program definitely, absolutely did not deserve that. This is really important to understand what Daniel is telling us here. He's saying that, I'll repeat it again because he said it in the letter, and obviously this was in the drone papers, is that the United States was killing, for example, 10 people along with one target, right? And just murdering these people and calling them enemy combatants because they're guilty by association. And how are they guilty by association? Just by existing. So they're not even doing anything nefarious. They could just be pissing on the side of the road. But because this supposed target who's next to them has a cell phone number, right? That doesn't even mean anything. Like, what kind of criteria is that? Like, oh, the digits and your SIM card matched up, therefore you must die and everyone next to you has to die. What kind of fucked up barbaric shit is that? And I'll also make another point. Like, there's no such thing as a valid target. Like, I want to explain this to you. Like, the United States, NATO has no business picking targets on the other side of the planet. Like, what does that even mean? Like, it's not okay to kill 9 people, but it's okay to kill. No, you shouldn't be killing anyone. Who gets to decide what's a valid target? Like, obviously, the threshold for that doesn't mean anything because they literally just kill everyone. Do you understand? That's my point. This is absurd, and it's evil on so many levels, right? The lies, the money involved, it's so dirty. And what kind of a justice system is that? Like, what is this justice system that we have in Britain? I'm ashamed. I'm really ashamed. What is this justice system in the United States? It's an injustice system. It's shameful. This is not justice. This is wrong. This is foul. So strength to Daniel. and go support him if you can. Obviously, I'll continue to report on him, and I will look if there's any other methods we can help, maybe with a legal fund or something. I have no clue. I will go and take a look. I hope that other potential whistleblowers are not frightened by this. Although I can understand, anyone would be frightened by this. You have your whole life torn to shreds. You're sent to jail. Who wants that, man? It's really difficult, right? It's really difficult to contemplate such a thing when you see what happens to whistleblowers. But that's what they want. They want people to be afraid to tell the truth about these crimes, because they need this cover. They need to maintain the illusion in the mainstream media, in the history books, the narrative that all these wars are good and they are nation building. This is bullshit. It's murder. This is an assassination program. So we need whistleblowers to tell the truth. And I think it's shameful that you have other governments playing along with it, right? Like, it would be one thing if the United States was doing it, but then they go and what do? They pressure the United Kingdom into playing along. Not that the UK is a saint either, but Italy, Germany, they had their own citizens tortured by the CIA, and then the US government pressures them successfully into not pursuing charges against CIA agents who tortured their own citizens. Can you imagine that? Like, can you imagine if you're from Italy or Germany and you get tortured by the CIA, and then your own government won't file charges against the CIA because Washington pressured them not to do so? Like, this is insane. This is unbelievable. I'm glad it's not 10 years, but this is 45 months too much, really. And everything before that, too much. Again, I have huge admiration for Hale, Chelsea Manning, all of them, really. Make sure that you like and share the video, raise awareness about this, because the mainstream media are not reporting about this. Like, I swear, go look up, like, in whichever newspaper or outlet you like. There's barely anything. I think I saw maybe one thing, like, in the Washington Post, and then, like, they don't care, man, right? This is, even the BBC, like, I just saw, when's the last time they talked about Assange? Like, January? If the media had any stones, if they had any respect, if they had any goddamn morals, if they had any backbone, if they had any spine, you know what they would do? They would talk about this every single day. They would talk about this outrageous nonsense every single day. But they don't, because they're state media. Remember that. You know how they talk about state media in other countries? No. The real state media is in the West, man. Because when it comes to crimes like this, they won't talk about it. When it comes to whistleblowers, they won't talk about them. They won't defend them. Just before Daniel was sentenced, okay, this is what he did. Before he was sentenced, Daniel Hale read a 6-page speech on the horrors of war as a descendant of Nathaniel Hale, and to ask the judge, quote, "Please forgive me for the crime of taking papers instead of the crime of taking lives," unquote. Again, the guy is a hero, and I hope he gets out.